Hello, TPM talkers, engineering excellence leaders. Welcome to Law 2, the second law in our 48 laws of power series for technical program managers, tech leaders. The law is working backwards, plan all the way to launch. Now, this seems like what you would naturally do, but for me, a technical program manager doesn't just track progress, right? You want to see the end from the start, you want to see the end from the beginning. They need to be able to anticipate dependencies, prepare for setbacks, and most importantly, you want to keep your launch date sacred. And in one tech company that I used to work, we would say, be stubborn on the goal, be flexible on the approach. And so there is no one better to talk about planning than President Eisenhower. Not just because he's president, I know, two for two, second president in this series, but because he was also a military general. He led the victorious, by the way, Allied forces in World War II, so he must have known a bit about planning. And his quote is, "Plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." Okay, so for me, in terms of my cheat sheet, a roadmap for me isn't just about prediction, knowing what's going to happen when. Most times you could miss that or not. It's really about preparation. It's about understanding what are those dependencies, those APIs, those bits and bobs that are going to bite us in terms of trying to deliver our milestones on the way to progress. So the pro tip I would say is always start with what your customers want, who your customers are. Start with your customers and work backwards, because as they say, your Gantt chart may change, but your foresight should not. You should be able to identify what those dependencies, what those things that could bite you later on. And certainly you would see that every launch that lands smoothly was planned backward from the end to the beginning, right? As they say, hindsight has 20/20 vision. So for you, the question is, what does program success look like? And that's where you begin from. What's your favorite tool for dependency tracking? Is it Jira? Is it Confluence? Is it Monday.com? Is it Asana? You need to have a best way, a best method to do that. So, who has obeyed this? And a good example, good adherent of this is, of course, our favorite 2 out of 2, Apple's Project Purple, which was the internal code name for the iPhone. They looked at it from end to end. In fact, believe it or not, in the first iteration, they partnered with Samsung. That was supposed to be an arch rival, but they were not going to take any risks, right? Only I think about 30% of the original iPhone was Apple's own IP. The rest, they worked with partners, a secretive core group of partners, because Steve Jobs wasn't going to take any risk on this. Where has this not necessarily been followed, or not followed to the max? One example in tech circles is Windows Vista, where there was rush timeline, ignored dependencies. Now, Windows Vista, for those that don't know, was released in January 2007. I want to say January 2007, after nearly 5 years of development. It was meant to be a major overhaul of the Windows operating system, the OS, not just visually, but at the architectural level. It was going to be a showpiece for new technology like Aeroglass, which was like a shiny 3D interface. It's almost like what iPhone has done now with this liquid glass in the most recent launch. It was WinFS, right? So Windows FS, which was a next generation file system. There was going to be an enhanced security with a user access control UAC, new driver models, integrated search. It was supposed to reinvent Windows for the 21st century. But despite lofty ambitions, it failed. Vista became a notorious disaster. It was dogged by delays, there was broken compatibility, there were performance issues, and there was a poor public reception. Right? What happened? There are multiple lessons that you can pick here, but I'll just pick 2 or 3. The first is they were going to have new hardware drivers. The problem was a new method to track hardware devices. And you may not know this, but when you see an OS like Windows or Linux, they have hundreds of components there. There's the driver, there's the kernel, there's the UI, bits and bobs. So the hardware, their main hardware partners, think NVIDIA, think IBM, etc. They were not ready for the hardware changes. So for that reason, it was breaking on compilation. It was very slow. People started cracking jokes about it. Then midway through the development, the WinFS was scrapped. I'm not kidding, it was scrapped. Meanwhile, the UI, the user interface team, had already created some of their features based on the technology that was scrapped. So by the time it was launching, engineers did not know which API calls were going to work. And then the testing cycle was shortened because when the WinFS was scrapped, they moved back to Windows 2003 OS. So you could see up and down the value chain, up and down the stream, there wasn't the massive elements of planning that were skipped. So you see the fact that it should be common sense to plan all the way. If you're doing a simple program, it may look easy, but if you have a large scale, complex transformation, turnkey, which is the kind of thing that they'll call it TPM anyway, you need to follow this principle. So, task for you all today: what is your favorite tool for dependency tracking? Comment in the box below.